Suzanne's Paparazzi Jewelry, 24/7 shopping available.
Hey everybody, welcome into an episode of the Red Tape Files. We haven't been on lately. We've decided to move to new nights, which is Fridays. I got my good friends Ace and Joanne, the lovely queen of the network, here with us. How you doing, Joanne?
I'm doing well tonight. How you guys doing? It's exciting. We haven't been on live in a while for the Red Tape Files, so I'm sure a lot of crimes have happened since we were on, so we have a lot more content.
And Ace, how you feeling?
I'm hanging in there.
So tonight we're going to talk about the disappearance of Christina Licorice. I can't pronounce her last name. Ace, you got that for me?
McKechnie.
McKechnie.
Joanne, you want to start off with this for us?
Sure. It's a little bit of a mystery, right? She seemed like an interesting character. She moved over from England in her teens, and then she was part of the Incredible String Band in the 60s and 70s. She performed at Woodstock, and then she found herself out in Sacramento, California. But she just kind of mysteriously disappeared, and the last known sighting of her was in 1987. No missing persons report was found, and they said that, she always wanted to hike through the Arizona desert, and they're not really sure what happened. I think the Scientology link is always interesting.
Yeah, Ace, your thoughts?
Yeah, the only last thing, so like you were talking about, to where they weren't really sure exactly what happened, but excuse me, everybody, I have a little bit of a cold, but with that, I read the three of the theories that they came up with, and so three of the theories that I came up with was that one of them, the first one, I could kind of see happening, to where they're talking about how, that foul play had to be involved, and the reason for it that they're saying that foul play had to be involved is because since she was a musician, and that she was in a band, and they had multiple hits, and actually you can find her music and everything when you research her name. You can find the songs that she was under, but she wasn't well known. And so the interesting thing is like, if she lived next to you, you may not even know who she is, because she was not like a well-known musician. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, one of the theories is that they're saying that foul play had to be involved because nobody ever collected her royalty checks after 87, after the supposed disappearance. So to me, I'm like, that foul play had to be involved at that point.
Right, it's weird she left in her teenage years from England to marry her bandmate, and they never ended up getting married.
Well, I think they were young. Yeah, they were young musicians. They went to Woodstock. They could have been living a party lifestyle. We don't know, but that could have also been a contributing factor, right? Musicians typically have, not typically, and I don't want to sound stereotypical, but on occasion, musicians have vices. They're that kind of lifestyle. She could have been drinking. She could have been on drugs. I didn't read any of that, but it's a possibility. Even if she had wandered into the desert, think about that. They said she walked through the desert. No one would have noticed her or recovered her bones. How far could she walk? Right? She's just
especially in the desert. But that's where I was confused though too, because I know, mess around, you mentioned that her and her boyfriend went out and started a band because she moved from England so she could get married, and they never got married so they could start a band. But from what I read, and I may have misunderstood, but I thought that she was originally in a band and then she left that band to start another band with the person that she wanted to marry.
So I was just reading here that it says that her sister says she went hitchhiking across Arizona, and the last time she heard from her was in 1990, where she was in Sacramento recovering for surgery.
Other accounts say 1987, but if she was hitchhiking, that's a different twist. You know, she could have been picked up then. That's true. I didn't think about hitchhiking. She could have been picked up, abducted, and murdered. And it's not like today. Today, if you're out there, you're on camera the entire ride. Maybe not in the desert, but there's cameras everywhere today that capture footage. So who knows?
I was also just reading that you're right. They think that her disappearance might be related to Scientology.
So that's kind of interesting. I'm not really one that knows a lot about Scientology. So Joanne, if you could kind of break this down a little bit, explain the whole Scientology thing and how they think that Scientology could be involved.
So I don't know a ton about Scientology, but obviously it's a religion, and many people consider it a cult. We have some major celebrities who ascribe to who are part of the church. We have Tom Cruise, Kirstie Alley, who just died, but I think the big, you guys remember Leah Remini? So she defected from Scientology, and she kind of blew them up and said that they don't believe in medical treatment. And so who knows, maybe they were mad at her for getting surgery, right? Because that's not something I believe Scientology wants you to have. I'm not positive, but I do know that they don't ascribe to medical intervention. So who knows? There are other, yeah.
It could be anything. I mean, there's not a whole lot to go on. It doesn't say how. I mean, the hitchhiking theory's one, Scientology's another, but who knows what happened to this girl? Maybe she got into drugs, like you were saying. Or, I'm not saying she did, but it's a possibility.
Well, there are other accounts that said she might have wanted to live a life of obscurity. She could have went back to England, or she could be living, just like you said, Adam, right next to somebody. She could be hiding in plain sight. They said there was a Facebook rumor a couple of years ago that said that she was living in wherever, Sacramento, and she thought that this was all amusing. And we have heard things like that. People come come back 40 years later and are back on the scene.
Yeah, but you would think that it's been way past four years, and so by this point in time, who knows? Like, if she did live that life of obscurity and everything else, because she didn't want to be seen, by now, she probably would have died of close to old age around this time. So I'm not saying she would be dead, but it could be close.
Yeah, it could be possible for sure.
But it's one of those things though too. It's like, how bad of a lifestyle did she have? Because that's one thing that we don't know. So if she wanted to, if there was some kind of like bad thing that happened between her and her boyfriend, and then the band that they were in, it's maybe he knows something, maybe he doesn't. But the thing that I'm really curious about is, was she going hiking alone?
Sounded like it. I mean, I'm reading about it a little bit more about it today. They said that her family, some accounts claim that her family hired private investigators to find her, and they were unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I do remember reading about that. But private investigators, number one, they are really expensive. I know that, and I know private investigators are typically, I think what they say, it's like 80% of the time or something like that, they can end up actually finding the person. So it's actually a relatively high percentage that they find the person. So
even with hiring the private investigator, I'm like, where do you start? Nobody knew where she disappeared and all that. So where would the guy even start?
Probably Arizona.
Yeah. And keep in mind, too, if she really was walking in the desert, if you're not fully equipped to be walking in the desert, you can, get impaired pretty quickly, dehydrated, passed out, and then you're susceptible to animals. So she could have just merely been out there walking around, passed out, and then then nature took its course. That's always a possibility.
Yeah, because there's definitely two things about the desert. Like we know during the day it gets super hot, but at nighttime it drops below freezing. And so it's like, so that's where, we don't exactly know at that point in time how bad, it could have been. The big thing that I'm really curious, why wasn't a supposable police report filed?
True. Well, maybe she was a wanderer, right? She seemed to travel the country a little bit. She was in Woodstock. She wanted to go to Arizona, and where would they have filed the missing report, right? The missing persons report. Her family probably didn't realize she was gone, and I don't know what this. It may have been a different procedure at that time too, but it is odd. Nobody ever looked for her. Nope. I mean the private investigators, but if there's no police report, that leads me to believe the police never looked for her either.
Maybe while she was hiking, she got attacked by an animal or a snake bit her or something. Anything's possible out in that desert. There's all kinds of wildlife out there.
True.
Yeah, but wouldn't they have, if they were to file a police report, wouldn't it technically be, if they knew her last place that she was Arizona, wouldn't they file it in Arizona?
I would say yes, but do we know that positively that they said that she was going to Arizona, but from California, you're leaving out of Sacramento. Maybe she never made it to Arizona.
True, because she did get her surgery in Sacramento, and everybody knew that. From what they knew, they said the surgery went really well. She was able to, kind of recover from that. She was doing great. She spoke to her sister. And then that's when she went hitchhiking. I don't remember, was it from Sacramento to Arizona? Because I don't exactly remember the exact location, but I know she left, and I thought it was California. It could have been Sacramento, but I don't recall if she went from Sacramento back to another place and then to Arizona. But I know she did go hitchhiking, and
it seems pretty vague. It just says she suddenly disappeared hitchhiking across the Arizona desert. So I don't know how she got there. And the hitchhiking was much more accepted in the 60s and 70s. I think now it's totally frowned upon, right? Nobody.
Yeah, I did read that she lived in Sacramento and LA and in Arizona somewhere, but it's a curious case.
Well, that's the thing, though. So she was hitchhiking across the Arizona desert. So if she was hitchhiking across the Arizona desert, that probably means at that point in time, somebody knows that she made it to Arizona then.
And was that a story? What women typically just go off on their own hiking in the desert? She could have been telling people that, and she could have been meeting up with anybody. She could have been having an affair with a married man. She could have had a clandestine lover. We never know. You never know what's going on behind closed doors in people's lives.
Right, and sometimes people just want to disappear and not be found. Start over under a new name.
Yeah, and the thing that I really questioned about this, that I was really wondering, is that, since they knew she had a ex-fiance, that she was in this old band, it makes me wonder, unless you guys saw this, but I did not see anything on this whatsoever. But it makes me wonder that if they were in contact with her ex-fiance to ask if he kind of knew anything, or if, they reach out to any of the band members and said, hey, do you guys know anything? Do you know what possibly could have happened? But from what I read, I didn't see any information about that.
So she would have been 77 today.
Wow.
So I'm curious how old she was. How old was she? So she was born in 1945. So she disappeared when she was...
In 1990 is when... So she would have been about 45 when she disappeared.
So relatively young, but...
Yeah, so that's not... So, so when we're talking about hitchhiking now, because this kind of changes the whole thing. So this wasn't like a young girl that just kind of took off. Now it's kind of a kind of a middle age, in her 40s, to where, she's deciding to go and hitchhike because obviously her movie, or not her movie career, but her, I guess her musical career at that point in time is over with. And so
it's curious to know, where are her royalty checks? Her family doesn't, collect them. Her sister may have had children.
You'd think someone in the family would have got them.
But that's the thing, though. If nobody knows what happened to her, would they be entitled to actually get all those royalty checks?
Well, at some point, the judge would declare, if somebody petitioned the court, the family, the judge would declare a missing person deceased. So they would have to go through, those channels. But some people are reluctant to do that because it's so traumatic for them. So, and
I was going to say, after so many years, you can do that, go to court and have them declared deceased, right?
Yeah.
Well, by now, because of how long it's been, you would know at this point in time, it's kind of around that point to where you can probably start declaring her as deceased at this point in time.
I would say so. So here's an interesting thing. She and the band they were set to take the America by storm. They played a short set at Woodstock, and they were so badly received by the rocker audience that their performance was left off the Woodstock album and out of the documentary film altogether.
I do remember that. I do remember reading something about that their performance was not up to snuff.
Yeah. Well, for the rock crowd, because she played the organ, so maybe they were good band, but not there.
Well, they played folk music, right? Maybe that wasn't the right kind of music for Woodstock.
It definitely wasn't.
Yeah, that's not. Woodstock is like a different, is a whole different form there. So maybe because their band wasn't up to snuff. I'm not saying that kind of drove her off the deep end or whatever, but
yeah,
maybe it could have. That would be pretty embarrassing.
I mean, most people say that she left Los Angeles in 1987, and then a few people say that she was living in Arizona 2 years later, and then in Sacramento after that. So, but one source claims she had a history of depression, which, could be a big factor. If you were depressed and went into the woods, maybe she wanted to end her life. I mean, if you're a 45-year-old washed-up musician with depression, it's not unheard of to just walk off somewhere and, meet your own demise. That could have happened too.
Yeah, it's. I've always had strong opinions about that, but I get where you're coming from. Because it does get too much in life at times, especially with depression. We see what depression does. And it definitely could have been a possibility to where she struggled so much with depression that she couldn't handle it anymore. And I know at times it gets to that point to where you just can't handle it. And that could definitely be a theory to where, she could have made up the story and said, hey, I'm going to Arizona. I'm going to go, hiking in the desert, which, does anybody know how big the Arizona desert actually is?
I think it's pretty big. I think most of Arizona, the state, there's a lot of desert there. I don't know exactly how big it is.
Okay, so that's where now it's a whole lot more tricky part, because even if you want to start looking in the Arizona desert, it's so big. Where do you start?
Right.
Yeah, true.
So mess around. Your theories on this. What are you thinking with like the little bit of evidence we have and everything else?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot to go on, but I kind of agree with you. Maybe she got like the post-traumatic stress disorder from the concert being real bad, and she just ran off, like you're saying, and wanted to get away from everybody.
I don't know. I'm just so stuck between like the little bit of evidence that we do have. I'm really deep down inside though. Something inside of me is telling me that this had something to do with foul play. Because a lot of times when we see or hear these stories about people hitchhiking, that's where usually a lot of things turn wrong, is with hitchhiking. So to me personally, I'm not saying I'm accurate, but I'm saying my feeling is that this is what happened. She took off to go hitchhiking. She ran into the wrong crowd. She met the wrong person, whatever. And foul play happened.
So you think she got picked up by some bad man, and something bad happened to her because of that?
Yeah, I mean, my theory, and like I said, I may not be accurate, but that's what my thinking is.
It's plausible.
Well, especially with hitchhiking,
Right.
she's 45, so she's not old. She's middle aged, and so a lot of times you see like a lot of middle aged women. They see them as prey, especially when you're alone in the middle of a desert.
And she was small. She was small in stature.
Yeah, small and stocky. Like I saw pictures of her too, and so you can kind of see she was very small. She was stocky, and so with that, I don't know if she was strong or not, but by the way it looked, you could kind of tell that a lot of people could overpower her, and so that's why my opinion on it is that yeah, foul play happened. And somebody dumped the body somewhere in the desert, and you'll never find it because it would just disintegrate at that point. It would be gone. So,
Right.
Joanne, now with all, I wouldn't say with all this information, with this little bit of information we have, what is your theory on what you believe actually happened?
I think I believe what you believe. I think she was out there hitchhiking. She got picked up. I mean, it back in that time, there were several actually hitchhike serial killers who would go. I don't believe it was in Arizona, but it could have certainly been the case there too, where they had killed numerous people along the highway who were hitchhiking in various situations, and then the bodies were found years later, and then these people were on the run. It's so easy out in the desert because there's your burial ground, there's your dumping ground.
Well, yeah, because what's the odds of finding a body in the desert?
Very unlikely.
Yeah, very, very unlikely. And it's like you said, the reasons are it's very, very unlikely. There's not only is it so hot, but if somebody does kill you and they dump you out there in the desert, you have a bunch of wildlife out there.
Buzzards and stuff, yeah.
Everything. And
there's no one out there to hear you scream either.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you might get lucky and you might have another hiker out there somewhere that might hear something. But I think, if any foul play did happen and the person's disposing of the body, they're going to obviously look around first to make sure that there's nobody there before they kind of dispose of the body. Whether or not they bury the body would be a whole other thing because they could be thinking like us, be like, oh, there's a lot of wildlife here. So if I just dump the body, the wildlife will kind of take care of the body itself.
Yeah, and even then, they probably went at night when nobody's out there, so they wouldn't be seen dumping the body if that did happen.
Yeah.
But you could, if you've ever seen Breaking Bad, right? I mean, that's a little bit about how the desert does look. So they could have just pulled behind a big rock. They could have got her in a car, waited till nightfall, and it's reminiscent of these cases. I mean, even you see these two cases in today's. We had that Eliza Fletcher, remember the runner I mean, and that individual had a gun. I mean, they said that she was killed in the first 2 minutes of being in the car. Then we had that, and then we have that heartbreaking story this week of the little girl who was pulled into the FedEx truck. And the same thing. He killed her in like the first 2 minutes. So it doesn't really take long to incapacitate somebody if you drag them in.
No, it doesn't. Because, I mean, to me, you think about it, you kind of get those two different types of people. The people who want to do it really, really fast, but then you have the other person who wants you to gain their trust in a way. So it's like, hey, I want you to trust me, so I'm going to show you that I'm a good person, and then we're going to travel so far, and then that's when I'm going to make my move.
Yeah.
And that definitely could have been a case of this. Now, mess around. I'm not saying you were wrong in any way
Right.
by saying that she ended her life, because she definitely could have. But
I'm torn between the two because it could have really went either way.
yeah, I mean, but to go on the third one though, what do you think is the likelihood that she could have just decided to, go back to her old name, like her first original name, just to blend in with everybody? I mean,
I say no. I don't think that it had occurred.
no, I don't think so either. Because I don't think that she would have wanted all her royalty checks and everything just to kind of go away.
And somebody would have seen her by now. I mean, something, her sister. I think that even if you imagine that, even if you decided to disappear off the face of the earth, I mean, would it really last 40 years? You might be able to hold off for 5, 10, but what if your parents die? Or eventually, I think that, most times people come, there's some extraordinary stories where they are really missing for that length of time. But most of the time, I think even when people drop off the grid, they do end up coming back.
Yeah, and I completely get you there. So that's why me personally too, I didn't believe that theory. I didn't believe that she decided to blend in with everybody. To me, it was more along lines of, hey, foul play happened.
I was just reading this theory that someone threw out there on Reddit that maybe she went back to England and hid over there, not to be found.
Maybe.
You were going to say something else, Joanne?
It was, but now I forgot.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No. I was thinking, oh no, this is what I was going to say. Where as if she was living amongst us, it could be, you ever see the stories where an abusive person has these people living and have tortured them so much that they're afraid to speak up? I mean, that could be a potential, but and where she's living with somebody, that's true too. I mean, she could be hidden in somebody's home for all these years.
Yeah, I didn't even think it. I honestly didn't even think about that, because every now and then you do see stories about that too.
Yeah.
So that could definitely be a possibility. We are at that time though, to where time's about to end here. So I guess mess around, Dave. We'll go ahead and start with you. What are your final thoughts?
I'm just glad that we're back doing the Red Tape Files. I've missed this, even though most of the cases we do don't have a lot of info. And I just look forward to continue doing more episodes with you guys.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Joanne, how about you?
I just want to thank you guys. It's great to see you again. Thanks, Crispy Bacon in the back, who's always our producer and is certainly instrumental in getting any of these shows out. And we hope you tune in, and we hope that there's a miracle and Licorice is found. But if not, hopefully, Faith tells us she's in a better place.
I'm really curious, before we end this, did either of you actually know before researching this that that Licorice was actually a singer? I did not know.
No. We should also acknowledge our viewers here. We have Kristen who came by. Kristen, yeah. Hi, Kristen. Thanks for popping in. And then we have Avery and Sky who are saying hi.
Hi, Uncle. Hi, Joe. Hi, Dad.
Thanks for watching.
So
Hi.
thanks for popping in. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Yep. So I believe since Joanne's back now, we're gonna probably start doing our, coast to coast thing here, like we were doing last time. So
Yeah.
Joanne, I believe that you were kind of picking the cases here. So I guess next week we'll see what Joanne comes up with, and we'll see what you got for us. So
All right, perfect.
we definitely want to thank our viewers for watching, and then you can catch us next Friday for another episode of Red Tape Files. Everyone have a great night. We'll see you then.